Hi, welcome to the Herbalstead. Today we're going to be making raw sauerkraut. Raw sauerkraut is one of the best probiotics that you can eat. It is full of lactobacillus bacteria, which is your front line of defense for all kinds of toxins, bacteria, and viruses in your gut. And if your gut is happy, then you're happy. If your gut feels good, then you feel good. So raw probiotic sauerkraut is the way to go. Let's get started. Okay, today we're going to be starting with a head of cabbage, as you see here. You want to wash it, take off any parts that are undesirable, and then we're going to weigh it so that we know how much salt we need to use for our sauerkraut. So here we go. We're going to put a scale here, and we're just going to weigh it in pounds and ounces. This is about 3 pounds, 4 ounces. So we're going to round it to 3 and a little bit. We'll just add a little bit of salt after we add the amount for the 3. Okay, I'm going to cut the stump off my cabbage. I'm going to cut it in half. And then I'm going to remove the core. Okay, we have all of our core removed. We're going to cut this into slices so that we can feed it into our food processor chute. Now, before we do that, I want to show you the blade that we use for the food processor. Most blades will have a slicing part, and then if you flip it over, it will have a part that will grate vegetables. You want to use the slicing portion of this blade because the cabbage is already in layers. So if you go to grate it, you're going to have very, very small particles, and we don't want that. So we're going to have the slice side up, and we're going to feed the cabbage into the chute. Okay, now that we have our cabbage all shredded, it should look something like this. And we're going to now add the salt to the cabbage so that we can juice the cabbage and also start creating the brine. When you have cabbage under brine water, only the good bacteria grows. When cabbage sticks up above the brine water, then you have the chance of bad bacteria growing. I use a good quality Celtic sea salt. I encourage you to use sea salt, not table salt, because then you get all the good minerals that are included in sea salt. And we're going to use 2 teaspoons per pound of cabbage. Our cabbage was 3 pounds. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a little bit because we were a little over 3 pounds. Now you're going to mix the salt in, and you're going to start the important part of juicing the cabbage. And that involves kind of mixing and squeezing. Here is the squeezing motion that you want to do as you're mixing the cabbage. And this is going to take about 10 minutes. If your cabbage is cold, your hand might go numb. That's something I try to remember every time I make raw cabbage or raw sauerkraut, is that if I don't take my cabbage out of the refrigerator ahead of time, I'm going to have a numb hand. But, you know, everyone survives. It's just a matter of how cold you want your hand to get. Okay, now I have the cabbage down to about half of its volume, its original volume, which is what you want. My cabbage did not juice very well. I find that cabbage that you buy from the grocery store does not juice as well as, say, a cabbage that is fresh from your garden. But that's okay because we have a backup plan. And that is, you're going to take a quart jar and you're going to put filtered water in it. And then you are going to add some of the sea salt so that you make your own brine solution. You want to add 2 tablespoons of sea salt to your jar of filtered water, which I have already done just for the sake of it needs some time to dissolve. And then you're just going to shake it a few times. Maybe do this before while you're while you're cleaning your cabbage and getting everything ready. And then we're going to start packing this into our jar. Now I use a 1/2 quart jar to do my sauerkraut, and there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, it takes fewer fermenting lids to do a few large containers as opposed to many small containers. And number two, it's easier to get it in the jar, to just keep on packing a large jar. And number three is because I want to have plenty of headroom in this jar, because you need water space, a brine space, you need space for your weight, and then you also need an air space. And by the time you do all that with a quart-sized jar, you run out of room and you end up with half a jar of sauerkraut. So I prefer to do mine in a 1/2 gallon jar or a 2-quart jar. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pack our cabbage into the jar. We're going to throw as much cabbage in here till it gets up to the shoulders, and then we're going to use our wooden spoon and we're going to pack it in here. And that way we can fill it more. And you don't really want a lot of air in with your vegetables, because air grows bad mold, and everything under the brine without oxygen is what's going to grow that lactobacillus bacteria that we want. So here we go. We're going to do the last bit into our jar, and then I'll show you how to finish this off. And we're going to do some more packing. And then we're also going to kind of try to clean up the little pieces from the side as much as we can. We're going to put some brine water in there, so that's not going to be a huge deal. And then we're going to kind of clean up our jar a little bit. Now, I use lovely glass canning weights, fermenting weights in mine, but I also use a fold top sandwich baggie. Not everyone wants to put plastic in their jar, and I am not a huge fan of plastic either, but I have just come to learn that this kind of holds all the little particles in kind of under the brine a little bit better. So we're going to put our brine water in, and then we're going to add our weight and our little baggie. You can choose to use the baggie or not, but I've only filled the brine up to about here because I do want some head space for air. So I'm going to put my little baggie in there. Things are still going to come up, but just not quite as much. And then you just slip your weight in. And again, you're going to see little floaters in the top, and that's okay, because as long as they have enough brine water to sit in, they aren't going to get moldy. It's when the brine in the jar in general starts to dry out that you're going to have a little bit of mold, and that's not going to happen overnight. It takes a few days. So just check it periodically. And now the last thing that we're going to add is our fermenting lid. And this is what they call a no water airlock. It doesn't have to have a little container of water here to keep the air from getting into the jar. It has a lovely little silicone seal, and that's what keeps the air exchange to one direction. The air can go out, but it cannot come in. So we're going to put this on here. This little easy fermenter lid, which is what I use, it is kind of nifty that it has a little date thing too. So today I believe is the 3rd. So I'm going to set it to the 3rd. I usually put it in my phone too, but I'm going to set it to the 3rd so that I can kind of keep track of when I started this ferment. And then I know when to check it, because you want to check it. You want to taste it after about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on your temperature in your house. But you do want to check it twice a week for water level. It also comes with this lovely little pump that pumps the air out of your jar. And as your cabbage ferments, you're going to notice that when you do this after you check the cabbage, you're going to open your lid, you're going to check it, you're going to add water, you're going to do all the things that you need to do. And when you put the lid back on, you want to pump the air back out. You're going to notice that bubbles rise from the bottom. And that's good, because your fermented cabbage is making gases, and those gases are going to want to come out, and that pump helps that to happen. So now we have our date set, we have our weight in, we have our brine in, we have our lid on, and all the air is pumped out. So now what? Well, this is what your sauerkraut is going to look like after it's been sitting for about a week. It's going to lose its lovely green color. It's going to look more like the sauerkraut that you see in the store. And I check mine at least once a week, if not twice a week. And the way you do that is just open the lid and look in and make sure everything is underwater. And if it's not, you're just going to grab your brine jar, which I keep around even after I'm done making my sauerkraut. I keep my jar of salt water. It's not going to go bad. I keep it around, and that way I can pour a little bit more. When it comes time to taste test your sauerkraut, you're just going to go in with a clean fork or spoon, and you're just going to pull out some of the little things that are floating around, and you're going to taste those. And if that's not sour enough for you, you leave it for another week. And if you test it the next week and it's still not sour, you leave it for another week. There's no right or wrong to the way that you like your sauerkraut. Just keep it under brine. That is the most important thing. Now, most sauerkraut, depending on your room temperature, is going to take 3 to 5 weeks. So keep that in mind, that at the 3-week mark, you definitely want to start tasting it. And then when you're done checking it or tasting it or whatever maintenance you're doing on it, you put the lid back on, you take your little pump, and you pump the air out. So it gives those gases room to rise, and you don't have to worry about it bubbling over. So now, what do you do with your sauerkraut when it is all ready to go and it's sour and it's the way you like it? All you do is you take off your fermentation lid. You take out your weight and your baggie if you've used your baggie. And I put one of these plastic lids on, and I keep it in the fridge. You still need to keep your sauerkraut under the brine level. So if you remove sauerkraut and you remove some of the juice, make sure that you put all the little pieces of cabbage on the jar, shove them back under the brine, make sure it has enough brine before you return it to the refrigerator. Always keep it under brine to keep the good bacteria in and the bad bacteria out. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope to see you for the next one. Have a great day.